Thank you very much. It's my great pleasure to have you all on the stage. And to set the scene, can I introduce Jenny Cameron? Jenny's been incredibly involved at the Ministry of Primary Industries as Chief Transformation Officer, and she's been very involved in how do we operationalise, that goal to double export trade. But more particularly, she's also going up to China next year, and she's going to be a deputy DG at MPI, and she's going to be promoting our China relationship. So if you can give us a bit of an overview. Thanks, Jenny. Would you pass me some water?
Yeah. Thank you. Tēnā koutou katoa. Zhou Xiong Hao, good morning. Tēnā koe Prime Minister, tēnā koe Ambassador Wang and other dignitaries here today. So yes, my name is Jenny Cameron, and my role is really to help champion the Going for Growth goals that the government has. I've got this title of Chief Transformation Officer, double export value, so everything I do is in my title. No small feat there. So the role of the food and fibre sector is critical for that goal, and the role of China is equally as important for that goal. As we've heard already this morning, agriculture and the food and fibre sector is absolutely core, and what we'll be talking about is how we deepen that core for New Zealand. So I'll keep my comments at a high level because you'll be wanting to hear from these people who actually do the mahi on the ground. Thanks to the sector's hard work, strong prices for exports and a focus on strong relationships with our trading partners, this year we were able to see in the food and fibre sector record revenue of almost $60 billion to the year end of 30 June this year. So that accounts for 82.5% of merchandise exports for New Zealand. So if there's any doubt of the role that the food and fibre sector plays in the New Zealand economy, that's it right there. But this wasn't just business as usual. As you'll all be aware, it's been a very unique year in terms of global trade, the range of multiple new tariffs taking effect and driving uncertainty. We've also had extreme weather events that have impacted a number of New Zealand's food and fibre sectors. So the fact that we were able to get that record revenue really shows to the strength of the trading relationships and the hard work of our farmers and growers. We've also got a situation where global commodity price volatility is at the highest it's ever been over the last 50 years. So this poses challenges for countries reliant on exports, of which New Zealand is absolutely that, and especially for those exporting bulk undifferentiated products. There may be special vulnerabilities on that. And that's why MPI and the government is keeping that focus on enabling settings to drive the value growth for the food and fibre sector. What you see here is that China, as we've already heard, is our number one market. What that represents in terms of that 31% is $18 billion of trade, or if we would put that on a daily rate, it's $50 million of trade a day. Our next biggest markets, as you can see, is the US, and that equates to about $7 billion, and Australia at around $5 billion. And then what's interesting is the other markets, that 24%, and that highlights the China and strategy that the Prime Minister identified and the opportunities that New Zealand has with our trade architecture around the globe. In terms of the Māori economy as well, which is our fastest growing part of the economy and is particularly interested in the food and fibre sector, nearly half of Māori food and fibre sector exports go to China. So it's a really critical market for our Māori exporters as well. New Zealand's approach through the food and the free trade agreement and the FTA upgrade highlights also the opportunities there, but MPI has that commitment not just to the trading relationship, but also the regulatory relationships that underpin that, agricultural cooperation and other joint architecture foundations that help to build the relationship and keep that certainty going for industry as they walk through those doors. So these are the stats, but can we take any of it for granted? The answer is absolutely not. We've already heard that China is the number one market for over 100 other countries. So We also, as we've heard, that we are a tiny player in the Chinese economy, so we cannot take that position for granted. We have to maintain that sophistication and innovation and those distribution channels. And what was so aptly said before, the Chinese demographic is changing, consumer and customer expectations are rising all the time. Also, our products are open for disruption. So that's where we need to make sure, and as MPI, we are staying aware, we're creating that enabling environment, and we're present in the market to build the relationships, solving problems, and providing the regulatory assurances that can then help industry go in and do what they do well. What does that mean in practice? It's things like, as was identified in the Prime Minister's visit recently, signing of new arrangements, establishing trade conditions for New Zealand deer velvet, seafood, and then allowing the import of Chinese pomelo. Cooperation activities such as the recent upgrade of our organic certification, mutual recognition arrangements are extremely important for removing administrative burden for businesses. And also those cooperation on the people-to-people ties, like we have a food safety scholarship program with Chinese officials. And after years of engagement, we now have a digital health certification, which then means over $12 billion of our exports does not need to be done by paper. And that's part of those digitisation goals that we have for the government as well. Can we deepen the trade, technology, innovation and sophistication? The answer is absolutely yes. The pace and scale of China means that New Zealand has to keep innovating. We can't be complacent. And that's where the dialogues are so important, not just for the trade of today, but the trade of tomorrow as well. So I'll end my comments there because we'll now hear from the people that are doing the mahi on the ground. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Jenny, and I understand you may go up to CIIE with the Minister later in the year, perhaps, ahead of actually taking up the role next year. Dan Boulton became CEO of Fern Farms in February 2024, and it's notable that all of these CEOs took up their current designations last year, so you've all been about a year or a year and a half in the role, but he is responsible for leading the company. He was previously Chief Supply Chain Office Lead and previously for Sea Lord, so very wide experience in the industry. Take us through your strategies in China.
Thanks, Fran. Daja hau, na mihi nui o te ata kia koutou. Yeah, it was also a real privilege to be part of the recent trade delegation to China. Now, that was really impactful, as you heard from DT just before. So thank you for that opportunity. It was probably the third time I've been up there in a matter of months, and that time on the ground is really, really important for us. You've heard this morning about that people-to-people connection, and I think really understanding the China market, because there are markets within markets in China, and that's what Fern Farms is about. And it was touched on also this morning, we sometimes overstate the challenges in China, and the growth potential that's still there, if you understand the market, is real. And I think, understanding your consumer, the channel, and where you have to show up, there's growth, huge potential. And I think, DT, you mentioned the quick service restaurant growth up there. New Zealand product is at the heart of many of those menus, so that's just a really good example of, what needs to happen. I think go narrow and deep versus wide is really important. We've been in the market for about 30 years now, and it tipped over about $1 billion turnover for Fern Farms a couple of years ago, and it makes up about 25 to 30% of total Fern Farms turnover, and for two reasons. China is the best paying market for many items that come off our animals, but also that long-term growth opportunity, and that's why we continue to back our China strategy going forward. We're very fortunate to have a 50% ownership in Fern Farms through Bright Meat Group, a Shanghai-based company, a great example of foreign investment into a New Zealand company that helped strengthen our balance sheet and allowed us to grow. But China itself, one of the largest protein consumers, red meat consumption has been growing substantially, particularly helped by on the back of Asian swine flu. So red meat is really getting a dominant position where pork was there. For us, just for context though, it's not easy. We have to be sophisticated around how we show up. For context, what New Zealand puts in, for red meat perspective, puts into China for a whole year, South America does in 1 week. So, yeah, we have two things. We have to differentiate our product, and I just want a big call out for the work, support from the Minister around Taste Pure Nature. That launch was outstanding, and Surma from MIA, telling our story really strongly around New Zealand grass-fed is absolutely essential when red meat is cluttered with a whole lot of other items. So great to see that get off the ground. It's great to see the grass-fed standard there that's going to underpin that, and then that sophistication around how we show up. And I guess for Fern Farms, we have a couple of options. We have been building really strong, deep partners in market. So we used to just deal with traders and importers. So we are showing up in those tier 2 and tier 3 cities, building those partnerships, getting greater transparency around pricing and margin. That flows back to our farmers back in New Zealand. And I guess there's two parts. One's a very strong retail presence. So, we've got some fantastic successes with some of the highest premium retailers you'll see anywhere in the world. We've got displays of Fern Farms chilled beef that are 3 to 4 metres long and growing, and it's outstanding. So we're in 5 right now national high-end retail brands, and we're getting a halo benefit because we're building growth into the category, and other retailers are coming to us to help support their New Zealand chilled beef category, which is absolutely outstanding. And I think also, we are in those shops because there's 1.4 billion consumers there, but within that we see there's about 315 million, I guess, premium red meat consumers. But within that we see about 100, our insights tell us there's 150 million consumers in China that care about red meat, but they also care about the ethical and sustainable attributes around it. So that's where we're turning up. And so it's in retail, it's in food service, and it's in distribution. So we're really going deeper into those sort of tier 2, tier 3 cities, because actually it is in central, northern and western parts of China where grass-fed red meat is actually being consumed. So real shift in terms of how we show up in that market.
Thank you. Jason, you were appointed CEO of Zespri in July last year, and you were previously Chief Operating Officer leading the response to quality challenges. I mean, Zespri has been a phenomenally successful growth story. Share a bit of it with us.
Sure, thanks, Fran. Daijao Hao. So, look, Zespri's purpose is really around helping people, communities, and the environment thrive through the goodness of kiwi fruit. And we've got an ambition around being the world's healthiest fruit brand. When I think about China and what we've done there, I mean, we've focused on 3 very strong building blocks. And we look at our kiwi fruit as being a healthy eating occasion. So every piece of fruit is a healthy eating occasion. And last year we provided 1.5 billion healthy eating occasions into China alone. We will increase this year by another 200 million pieces of fruit into China. And over the next 10 years, we look at doubling the size of our business in China. So when I look at the agenda, we're talking about uncertainties and complexity. We have a great level of confidence about the opportunities ahead of us in China. And it comes down to 3 really key building blocks for us. So the first is around strong partnerships. We have a really strong partnership model where we partner with our customers, partner with our supply chain partners, and we've had work with them for multiple decades now. So they understand our fruit, they understand our consumer, and they can make sure that we provide the best service we can to them. We have 100 people so in China working for Zespri alone. However, when you look at our partners, they've got multiple people who are employed specifically to look at Zespri's business. It's close to 1,000 people working specifically for Zespri every single day to get natural nutrition to our consumers through our kiwi fruit. So that's the first building block, that partnership model. The second for us is investing heavily in branding and making sure we differentiate our brand. And we do focus on natural nutrition. We believe that we've got a nutrient-dense product. We can provide natural nutrition to consumers every single day through the goodness of kiwi fruit. So we make sure that we're investing heavily in our brand to differentiate in the market, to allow our consumers to understand that proposition. And then the third one for me is really making sure that we continue to be part of the culture and part of the social enterprise or the social community in China. So we invest heavily to make sure that not only we're providing a product, but we're also helping to lift society, raising awareness of malnutrition, we focus on investing in close to 1,000 schools throughout China to talk about the balanced diet, making sure that we're able to give more information around the benefit of having fruit as part of your diet and raising that awareness. So those are probably three key building blocks that we look at, strong partnerships, investing in our brand to support our product, and being a part of the social fabric within China.
Thank you. And finally, among our leaders, Richard Allen, from President of Fonterra's Global Ingredients business last August. The remit widened this year to also include the business in Greater China and Middle East Africa, aligning with Fonterra's shift to a global channel-led structure. But however, in your earlier career, you also helped transform Fonterra's food service business in China, so you have great China cred, so take us through it.
Good morning, thanks Fran. Richard Allen, I run our global ingredients business. As Fran mentioned, I also spent quite a bit of time up in China when we were launching our food service business. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about both, I guess, the ingredients and the food service opportunity. I think just before I start though, and in the spirit of free trade and growth, I did want to acknowledge the Minister, the announcement this morning around finally a successful negotiated outcome on the Canada-New Zealand dairy quota dispute. That's been a huge effort, I know, from the Ministry and yourself, so thank you for that. And again, more opportunity for us to bring value out on the market back home, so thank you for that. China is a wonderful market for us. We've been operating in the region for well over 40 years, and I guess our business in this market has evolved pretty considerably over that time. When we started, it was all about milk powders, and very much over the last few decades that has evolved. I think the way I would describe it is, the Chinese consumption is shifting from drinking their dairy to eating their dairy. And that's a really interesting opportunity for us because with that comes some pretty significant opportunities for us to add value and to also bring greater nutrition to the Chinese consumer. When we think about the dairy nutrition and the role of dairy nutrition in China, what has been an awesome, I guess, advancement over the last few years with the Healthy China 2030 plan is that in that plan they actually recommend an increase in the intake of dairy nutrition from 300 grams to 500 grams a day for an adult. That alone has the potential to increase Chinese dairy consumption by 700,000 tonnes by 2030. That is a very big number, and there is a huge opportunity for us to continue to support, I guess, Chinese dairy nutrition into the region. We're seeing some quite significant shifts, though, in consumption, very much the rise of a much greater awareness and a focus around healthy aging, a much greater awareness of nutrition and what people are consuming. With that, the rise of protein, and that follows on trends that we're seeing in other parts of the world, like North America and across Europe. And that's always underpinned, though, with a very, very, I guess, clear focus on how the product is made. That started with quality, but more and more is now shifting into, well, what are the attributes of the way in which the product is farmed? And so, Jenny, I think Dan mentioned it, but the recent launch of the grass-fed standard is another significant opportunity for New Zealand exporters, those that utilise a grass-fed system, to continue to add value and to target, I guess, high-value Chinese sectors. When we think about, I guess, our two channels in China, the food service channel for us has been a pretty phenomenal success story over the last few years. In 2024, that business generated about $4 billion in revenue. That was double from what we were doing in 2017 when I left. So wow. You can see what change in leadership can do. But a pretty significant channel for us. We operate now in over 500 cities. That's across Tier 1, 2, and 3. And we will continue to see rapid expansion. I think to pick on Dan's point, there is a really important role of focus in China. And we have been very, very focused in how we've executed that food service strategy, very much targeting what we call a dairy upgrade. So targeting non-dairy creams, non-dairy dairy alternatives, and then really talking about the nutrition and benefits, the taste benefits, the functionality benefits of utilising dairy. And that alone has driven some pretty significant growth. Innovation has probably been the other big story for us, and this is across both channels. And in our food service business, we've invested significantly in really developing our local innovation capability. So we have 6 application centres across mainland China, and within those we have over 50 chefs who work closely with our customers across the region, and really ensuring that we take the best of New Zealand dairy, but we apply that to local tastes and local trends. And that has been a big part that's underpinned our growth. From an ingredients perspective, ingredients by volume, it's our largest ingredients market. This has been a significant market for us some time. It started off as purely sort of a milk powders market, but as I said, over the last few years, this is very much quickly transforming into a market of extreme value for us in terms of our cheeses, our milk proteins, and again, the role of innovation has been critical in our ability to move with consumption trends, work with our local Chinese customers, and really help them understand how dairy can bolster their products, both in terms of a nutrition perspective, but also in terms of them getting dairy out onto the shelf and into the I guess wider cities across China. None of that would have been possible without, I guess, the strength of the relationships between New Zealand and China, the gold standard free trade access that we gained, the hard work of this government and many governments before it in terms of really getting that access for us as an exporter that allows us to get in there, work with our local customers, our local partners, focus on innovation, get focused on where dairy nutrition really has a right to play. And yeah, very, very grateful for the work that's been done and very excited about what's to come.
Thank you. And welcome, Todd McClay. I mean, Todd has been exceptionally busy out in the world in many markets this year, opening doors and forging new agreements. And I want to congratulate you and your predecessor, also Damien O'Connor, on the work that you do, which paves the way for our exporters to trade. What excites you about the current environment in China?
Well, Fran, thanks so much. And I was just thinking, if you look at everyone on the stage, this is the start of a bloody good dinner in China, isn't it? Because if you look at our export profile, what excites me is the absolute unbridled opportunity that we see in the Chinese market. When the government was formed and I was given the honour of being Trade Minister again, I got up to China fairly quickly. And of course, with you, Fran, and a very big, our largest delegation of businesses went to the CIE as well last year. And there was sort of talk more broadly in the media about what was happening in the Chinese economy and was it growing. But there's 2 things we're going to focus on. You know, even with the level of growth China has at the moment, if I was to say to you, every year I can find you a country 4 times the size of the New Zealand's economy that you can buy and sell as much as you want from, you would say, great, let's get there. And ultimately, that's the size of the growth alone in the Chinese market. And we already have that trade agreement. We have wonderful relationships through businesses in others there. The second thing is there's 500 million consumers who are younger, who are less traditional. They don't probably cook at home as much. For many of them, they may not have full kitchens in their houses or their apartments. And they are interested in what is produced and what comes from New Zealand. It's that providence story. And so I think, irrespective of what happens anywhere else in the world and the headwinds, and my advice is don't read the newspapers. You won't want to, except for the Herald, don't read the newspapers. You won't want to get out of bed. But where there is adversity, for New Zealanders who work hard, there is opportunity. And I see nothing but promise in the relationship with China.
I can't let that slur pass. We have a number of very good agricultural journalists in the room today, Minister, and I'm sure they are absolutely.
But I don't judge them as newspapers. They're wonderful people.
It's all right. We'll continue later. Anyway. One of the things that's come up is the need, and Jenny remarked on it, to protect our position. We can't take it all for granted. I mean, from a governmental perspective, what does that imply for you?
Yeah, look, you're absolutely right. If you think about the early days of the trade relationship and how quickly it grew and how it's changed, we, as the first country, and it's something that we have to keep reminding ourselves, it is worth celebrating, the first country of the world to have a full free trade agreement with China. That first, for the Chinese government, New Zealand government, is something we need to focus on and keep talking about, because it is very important. But secondly, what that meant is we sort of had the playing field to ourselves a little bit alone for a long time. If you go up to China now, that's not the case. Everyone in the world is there. They're playing, very aggressive catch-up to New Zealand. And although their products are not as high quality, they're not as good, they're not as tasty as ours, sometimes they're not bad either. And so we have competition in that market. That means that actually we can't rest on our laurels, and from the government as well as the companies, we need to be at our very, very best. An example of this, though, is the way that the New Zealand government with the Chinese government keeps working away at building greater understanding and finding ways to simplify rules and help products in both directions get across the border into markets more easily. The announcement of the Prime Minister around New Zealand cosmetics and skincare products back into that market is really significant. When the sector came to me, not long after I'd become a minister again, and sort of said, we've been talking for a number of years, it was a few $100 million, we virtually are not there anymore. I remember saying to my officials and getting other ministers' officials in and saying, but this $200 million to small businesses, this is madness. Let's just find a solution. And it took a lot of goodwill and hard work on both sides, including with the Chinese government, to get that over the line. And it means, small businesses in New Zealand have huge opportunity there. So we've got to keep working away at these sort of things. But the other reason, the other thing we need to do, as well as continue to invest in the relationship at all levels and all ways, is continue to find ways to talk about exceptional, what's exceptional in New Zealand and what's great. So as a few people on the stage have mentioned, we launched at the Field Days a month or so ago, the New Zealand grass-fed standard. And that came out actually of the visit to the CIIE, where the companies on the stage, others are talking about grass-fed, but so are many other countries of the world. And what we decided in discussion with the dairy and meat sector is, to make that claim, we need to back it up with the government that says, here is a certificate or here's a stamp that says if you want to use the word grass-fed anywhere around the world, but in this case in China, this is what it means. To give you an example, and what that actually means is New Zealand gets to define what grass-fed is as a standard, and so these guys are going to make the claim and to promote that and work through it. As an example, I think the US as one example, to use the term grass-fed in the US, the cows need to only be on grass for maybe 100 days a year. They wouldn't even get tax residency in New Zealand at that rate, right? But in New Zealand, if you think about it, we are grass-fed. It's a wonderful claim. Those 500 million consumers in China, those younger people, want to know about that and are willing to pay more for it. And so that's the government working closely with the sector to make sure that excellence that we know about, we don't take for granted, but we can also stand behind it so it has value in the market.
Thank you, Minister. One of the points that Dame Therese made earlier is, in this very competitive market environment, a need for perhaps to project more of a Team New Zealand approach. Any views around the panel from our exporters on that, in terms of the brand? Who'd like to kick that off?
Yes, sure. I gave you that example around the huge growth opportunity around New Zealand grass-fed chilled beef. We've invested heavily in a platform. We've opened the channel. However, we've only got so much supply, and so there's a real opportunity here around how we collaborate with other red meat companies to actually work together to leverage that versus them all investing in their own things. So greater efficiency in terms of marketing investment, and then greater efficiency in terms of our investment behind Taste Pure Nature. So I think those are the things we need to be looking at versus trying up individually. I think a takeout from the delegation was often we think about our own sectors as well, but the intersection between tourism, education and primary is really powerful as well. So how do we grow awareness with our food products, and how does that drive potential tourism opportunities back here in New Zealand, and it becomes a little bit circular. So how we think about that, so I think it's really exciting.
Yeah, I think there's a huge opportunity. I'd say, though, it has been happening, and it's been happening for a while. I think the work at NZTE, particularly up in China, there is a pretty significant amount of collaboration that goes into really building brand New Zealand, ensuring that, exporters show up, that we're kind of on message in terms of what are those values we're trying to promote: quality, green, grass-fed, the like. So there is always more opportunity to do that. It definitely resonates, the New Zealand story resonates with Chinese consumers, and so I think the more that we go together and really talk about the benefits of sourcing from New Zealand, there's benefits for everyone in it.
Yeah, I think from me. So I look at it more around how do we share information and how do we share insights. I mean, each of us is sort of up in China pretty regularly, but you can't always be up there. We've got teams on the ground that are seeing different things at different stages over the last 12 months. I've spoken to both Fonterra and Silver Fern about what are they seeing on the ground, what is happening in the markets, and just being able to compare notes. And we do that with multiple other companies in New Zealand as well, just being able to sort of see what's happening and share insights. So I think that's really where the benefit is being able to say, how do we make sure that we're seeing what's on the ground and how we're working together with the insights we've got.
Jenny, people have just brought up the grass-fed standard. I mean, how do you see that being projected through the work you'll do when you go to China and further developments on that score? Yep.
Yes, so that was a great example of collaboration across the dairy industry and the red meat sector. I think one of the things too with the provenance, we take a lot for granted in New Zealand, and then we need to project that and tell that story in offshore. So we got the administrative standard done, and now we're working on the logo and the with Fern Mark around that, which is where we're aiming for CIIE. So that we're still continuing work on that, which I think will be really exciting. And I think that opportunity for the halo effect, when which can come through with the work that has been mentioned with Taste Pure Nature, grass-fed, and how getting that, what the attributes of New Zealand product is, and the nutrition, the safety, the quality, and the sustainability, and really highlight that.
Okay, I will open Slido for questions from the floor for those who would like to place some. But meantime, how are you all adapting to a more vigorous competitive market in China? I mean, it doesn't stand still, and our speakers this morning, including the Minister, the Prime Minister, and Dame Therese, have all alluded to this. I mean, is it exciting? Is it a challenge? Okay. Keep you up? Keep you going?
I'm happy to say it's exciting. I enjoy the most going to China because every time you go there, you're learning something new, you're getting engaged, you're getting a whole lot of energy. The partners we work with are full of energy. They want to see, it's all about can do, find solutions. We don't get that in every single market around the world. So when you've got people who are wanting to find ways to get to have solutions, make progress, it's pretty exciting. And I think what we're seeing is it creates opportunities. The partners that we work with there are looking at how they can continue to grow, how they can invest more. But also when I see where we've got to, I mean, we've got probably a globally leading supply chain in China because our partners have invested heavily behind it with new technology, new automation. And now we're starting to say, well, how do we actually show other partners around the world what they can learn from what the progress has been for our China market. So I think it's quite exciting to see the progress, but also the attitude around can do and solutions focus.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's certainly competitive, but I think that what that competition drives, and it's forced us to really focus on, is this deep investment in innovation and staying ahead and ensuring that, yesterday's product won't be tomorrow's product in China, and you do have to stay ahead. You have to stay with local adaptation and local taste changing. I think the big benefit for us, though, is a lot of that speed that you have to be fast in China. You have to innovate quickly. The speed at which we used to innovate just doesn't stack up there. And so what that's driven back into the organisation for us is not only, I guess, a much more faster pace around how we do things, how we innovate, but a lot of the innovation that we're generating out of China is now allowing us to move into regions like Southeast Asia and take that value into those regions and grow those regions as well. So daunting, but definitely a benefit for us.
Yeah, I'll just build on that. The pace of change in China is immense. And in the innovation space, if you're a New Zealand company trying to take New Zealand ways of working into that market, you'll struggle. And I think, sharing Fern Farms, our culture didn't quite align in the innovation space. They're wanting new products every time we meet with a customer. So the good news is, as you mentioned, Rich, that we actually bring in that capability back into how we work in New Zealand and applying it across other markets. So that's interesting. In terms of competition, I talked about the volume of red meat going into that market. So we just have to work really hard. This has forced us to collaborate, to tell our story stronger. But also, we're also navigating other challenges. Up in China, may not be known, but there's an investigation on all red meat imports over the last few years, and the impact and potential safeguard measures coming to protect their own industry. So we're working really closely with our officials and MFAT around making sure that New Zealand comes out of that very, very strongly, because actually we're grass-fed, they're grass-fed, and we're all trying to grow a premium category together up there. So there's actually a really positive story, but there's competitions always, and that creates innovation.
Sounds like a lot of work for the Minister and MPI up there.
Fran, the other very important thing, we talk about the people-to-people links, and governments have to lead that. But if you think about the Prime Minister's announcement around visa-free travel, I want to tell you just how significant that is, not only in as far as the relationship's concerned, but actually probably the view of Chinese people and of New Zealand. I guess we're one of the first Western countries to make that decision around a form of visa-free travel, and for visa holders who have gone into Australia to come here, actually in the end is a no-brainer. But it is a challenging decision for any government to do, because it's taking a step into not the unknown, but something sort of that is a first for us. But if you think about that, what it does, just as Trade Minister, put aside, I think, the significant benefits we're going to see from a tourism perspective, that means there will be more flights to New Zealand, going to more destinations, that we can put more products in the hold of and get out to those markets. And we know that there is a desire for what we produce in New Zealand. Our challenge sometimes is getting it to the market in the most effective and efficient way. And so, that announcement alone, I think, is one of the best things we've done in a period of time to send a very clear signal to Chinese consumers of the great importance New Zealand places upon that relationship with China.
Just before I go to questions from the floor, we do have a couple of wine exporters at the table up here. Jenny, you've been doing some work with the wine industry, and of course they're wanting to increase their footprint in China. So where's that heading?
Simon Limmer's nodding vigorously. Just to build on the point made by the Minister, I think that's where things like the air freight agreement that's just been signed, that's of huge opportunity for seafood, berries, all of that high value premium where it needs to get in fast. There's simple things that then can be done, which is where MPI and MFAT and NZT and others are working on those rules around fresh, chilled access versus frozen access. Those things all make a difference in terms of that speed of access into different channels, moving up into different sort of product category mixes. So there's a huge amount of all of those regulatory settings and policy settings that make a huge difference, and then the access via ports, cargo, air freight as well is extremely important. In terms of wine, we actually only export 2% of our wine into China at the moment, and in terms of that, looking where demographics are shifting, where new markets are, where we just haven't maybe actively built markets, Asia, Southeast Asia is an opportunity, and I know the wine industry is looking at China. I'm sure Simon will be happy to talk about that later.
Okay, questions from the floor. One from Gabriel James. Is much happening in the area of traceability and sustainability certifications and compliance to uplift value for our premium exports?
Well, I might just jump in, and others will have a view. But if you think about the grass-fed standard, let's talk about it as a good example of that, but it's a collaboration. When it came to designing that, we decided to try to not be like a government, which is thousands of officials everywhere jumping on every farmer and making it so cost prohibitive that people would want to give up. And ultimately, you've got to build a bit of trust in the system. Now, the New Zealand exporters have significant reputation at stake when they make a claim at the market, and we've decided as a government to back that up with the standard. But we've found a way to do it in such a way that the onus is upon the companies themselves to work with us on enforcement rather than government having to try and do everything. And what that does is certainly keeps the cost down, but drives the benefits. And at the level that we thought, should we load everything into this, is a claim that says if you want to say that your product is grass-fed, this is what it means. Thereafterwards, any claim a company wants to make, they must go through a normal process to do themselves. So the way that we need to do this to continue to drive value is not for a government to think it knows it all, nor for the sector to think it can go alone. It's that that idea of partnership that you asked about a little bit earlier, Fran. That's how we make sure we get it right. We can keep costs down. That means, my farmers earn more, but that these guys can excel in those markets. And in some cases, that certification and the claims that we make will drive greater value. In other cases, it's just the cost of doing business. We may not get more money for it, but it means Chinese consumers will choose a New Zealand product rather than somebody else's.
I think traceability for the China market has always been front of mind for a long time, as is food safety. The comment around sustainability is growing, and I think if people feel that sustainability doesn't matter in the China market, that they're a long way wrong on that. And I think every time I go to China, I see it appearing in companies' sort of ambitions around sustainability and also health, and we can win on both of those. And China's come out with their 2030 health ambition, and there's a fantastic connection with that. And we're seeing that not only with the younger generation that are coming through, but seniors are becoming more health conscious as well. And I'll sort of weave a story here, and Dame Therese talked about it earlier. That EV car company we visited the other day, they are doing phenomenal work in that space, but they're also building that sort of lifestyle club or culture there, that they are actually selling products that aren't the car, and they are selling products that align with their values. And Fern Farms products are on their platform. And we sold 30,000 packs of reserve beef in 1 week on an EV car digital platform. So that's the different business models that are working. We're working with Huawei. They've got 300,000 employees through their digital platforms to access those consumers directly. So, and they're there. They want to work with us due to our link to sustainability and the work we're doing around working alongside the environment.
A couple of questions here, probably for you, Rich. How's Fonterra addressing the competition from Chinese-owned dairy companies in New Zealand and declining birth rate in China that is shrinking market size? And then another one from Leon Fung. How do Chinese consumers' appetite for dairy differ from other Asian markets, and what unique opportunities does this present for dairy here?
I'll try and be quick. There's a bit in that. No, so in terms of New Zealand and milk supply, obviously, the thing we focused on most with respect to earning the right, I guess, to have milk in New Zealand, to keeping the cooperative strong, is through performance, right? And over the last sort of 5 to 6 years under Miles, Peter, the reset of the strategy, the simplification of the strategy, the focus back on New Zealand milk and adding value to New Zealand milk. And I think, the performance, the steady performance improvements we've seen over the last few years, that's what our farmers wanted to see. We're rebuilding trust. We're rebuilding that connection. And now very much, the focus is on how do we tell that story in terms of the reach that we have to markets, the connection to the customer, but also always reinforcing, particularly to this next generation of farmers coming through. We're about to go through a pretty significant change in farm ownership in New Zealand. The criticality of strong cooperatives for the New Zealand economy and for New Zealand farmers. And so, it's a big focus for us, but we're really pleased with the progress we've made over the last few years. With respect to, I think there was a question on declining birth rates. That has been in place for some time now, and we, like we do in all our markets, like we do with changing consumer trends, consumer demographics, we shift our product mix. One of the benefits to what we have, and one of our key advantages, is that we have a large asset base. We have lots of options with what we can make, lots of options with where we can sell. And so our ability to respond to, I guess, changing demand trends around the world is one of the key strengths of the co-op. And then the final question with respect to, I think, the similarities or differences between Chinese dairy consumption and other parts of Asia. I would say there are a lot more similarities than differences, but Asia's a big place. And so, key similarities in certain sectors like bakery with parts of North Asia, like Japan and the like. And then if you look at things like processed cheese, extremely similar to what we're seeing across Southeast Asia in terms of, some of the trends and growth we're seeing in processed cheese. Probably the one common theme right across the region is a channel which we'd call beverages. And so this is milk teas, this is your tea shops and the like, and this is a pretty explosive, I guess, category in terms of right across the region, the growth rate we're seeing in beverages. What we'll see in each of the regions is different in terms of maybe the flavour profiles, maybe the consumption formats. But, you know, there are very, very clear similarities in what we see in demand in China. Sometimes China leads on the trend, sometimes it's other parts of Asia, but you tend to see sort of a convergence over time.
A question for across the panel from Cleo Gilmore. Do you see a risk of NZ Inc. outsourcing our ability to engage with China to China? In other words, is building Kiwi capability to operate in China part of future strategies?
I think the biggest thing for me is you've got to be in China to be able to experience and build capability in China. And so we employ a local team up there, and ultimately they're able to keep up because they're living and breathing it day in, day out. You know, the innovation changes are happening rapidly. The consumer channels are changing rapidly. I mean, we've moved more than 40% of our business online to be able to keep up with e-commerce. When I was in China a month or so ago, they're delivering kiwi fruit through drones anywhere that you want to be. So you go online, you buy a piece of kiwi fruit, it gets delivered by a drone. So you just can't keep up with that pace when you're in New Zealand. So I think it's more around, we look at how we build capability within the team in China. There are opportunities because we're a global organisation to be able to move people through into that part of the business, but you've got to be on the ground to really keep up with that, from my view.
I think building capability is really important, and we have New Zealanders cycling through our office up there, just really learning and bringing that knowledge back. But if you're a small exporter looking at getting into New Zealand, there are other ways to build capability. And 10 years ago, we were with PCNZ here. That's a fantastic vehicle that's in China that supports companies to try to get in the ground, and that support that's required there. We're a graduate now; we've got our own business, but there are David Boyle's here in the front row. Like if you're looking at getting into China, and it seems very daunting. There's some fantastic resources alongside NZTE to be able to help New Zealand Kiwis get up there and really sort of work through some of those challenges.
Yeah, one for the Minister from Daniel Wong. Beside primary industries, how can we support New Zealand tech and innovation and also nutrition products which have clinical evidence back to China to drive growth?
Yeah, very important, and it's an important area of the sort of the growth. And if we are to double the value of exports over 10 years, the value of exports, it's got to be more than just the things that we're doing now. Of course, we have a services upgrade as part of the FTA underway with China at the moment, and there's progress being made, and officials are working away at that, and that's a big component of that. That gives opportunity for New Zealanders in that market. Firstly, secondly, you've seen the government announce both around foreign direct investment into New Zealand and science as one of the biggest reforms we've seen in a long time. I've been given the privilege of being now Minister of Investment as well, which is foreign direct investment. And that's really to find ways to drive investment into startups and technology and New Zealand companies to help them grow and flourish. We're a country of people that come up with wonderful ideas. We need to find ways to not only incubate those, to commercialise them, but then to push them out into markets around the world. And China will be a very important part of that. And so what you'll see, as well as with other strategies, to do more trade missions over the next 3 years than a government has done in a term of Parliament. We should just keep doing that, keep setting targets that are ambitious and keep sort of reaching for the sky. You will see us start, as we've moved through many of the larger sort of trade missions, more traditional ones, to be focused on sectors and with groups as opposed to having, New Zealand-wide or New Zealand Inc. there. And so I think the most exciting thing is the reason in all of our exports, particularly with China, we talk about the primary sector so much is it's probably the world's biggest success story. A little country of now 5 million people that is not only feeding the world, it is setting the standards and driving reputation around quality in the world. But behind that, there's opportunities to grow exponential growth, both in agricultural technology or food production technology, but every other part of the tech spectrum. We are working very, very closely now with New Zealand Trade and Enterprise and others about how we really start rolling that out to grow the economy, to export more, and just deliver more for every Kiwi household.
We're starting to run out of time, so we've probably got time for about 2 more questions. This is from Liverpool Zhang from the Bioeconomy Science Institute, which is emerging, obviously. Anything you could learn from domestic competitors to improve and stay ahead on technology and innovation? I mean, how keenly are you focused on what's happening in China?
I mean, the thing that we keep looking at, so both with competitors on the ground, but we're basically looking at route to market, how do you advertise, how do you market your product? That's probably the most relevant for us. We're seeing increasingly more competition from local brands that are investing heavily in advertising and trying to reach consumers. So share of voice is challenging, and making sure we can continue to communicate with our consumers is something that we continue to focus on and learn from our competitors as well. I think innovation, we've talked about China speed of innovation. You have to move quick to be able to keep up. We're seeing both from a breeding perspective, an increase in the amount of people who are breeding new kiwi fruit or new fruit products and registering variety rights for that as well increased over recent years. So there is a focus on innovating new products and commercialising new products quicker. So look, we see that, we learn from that, and we adjust where we need to.
Yeah, probably the only build from our perspective is when you look at some of the domestic or the Chinese dairy companies, the scale of automation that they're putting into their processing facilities and the degree of technology that they have on the ground there is nothing short of phenomenal. And so that has allowed us to really go up there, understand where and how they're doing that, and then bring that back into some of the new investment we're putting into New Zealand and really looking at those opportunities for automation and technology.
The only build I'll talk about there is as we're moving up the value chain and disrupting supply chains, it comes down to partner choice, and we're making sure we're partnering with the people that have that advanced technology in the way they're doing e-commerce, because we can't do it all ourselves from New Zealand. So I think choosing your partners wisely to leverage and make the most of these technology advancements is key.
Yeah. Just one last question from Gabriel James. Are there any shifts or threats to exporters from recent trends towards onshoring and domestic supply chain security?
I mean, we're looking at it in terms of how we make sure that we're local for local. So this is a global strategy that we have. So we obviously produce a lot of fruit out of New Zealand that we want to supply. We believe that's nutrient dense, high quality fruit. But we also look at changing consumer preferences, wanting to buy local, and whether actually partnering with local growers to be able to produce fruit in those markets. And we've already got an established business doing that for the last 2 decades, but we continue to look at how that will play a role going forward to make sure that we're providing supply both out of New Zealand but also out of local production as well.
We haven't actually tackled tariffs, US, all of that. Okay, don't all blanch at once. Okay, just quickly round the table. Any difference to your strategies vis-a-vis China or not?
I mean, tariffs, it is what it is. We just get on with it. We started the year basically saying how much fruit we're going to put into North America. We've increased the amount of fruit going into North America this year, even amidst tariffs. So it is what it is. We're investing for the long term. We think that the growth here is great. So.
Very similar. The demand for protein around the world is very, very high. Hasn't really changed our strategy. What we're probably more watching is the dislocation of protein from other big producing nations and how that impacts our other markets. Brazil is a great example right now with the potential 50%. Where does that Brazilian beef go? But interestingly, the recent stats of Brazilian beef into the US last month's gone from about 40,000 tonne to 15,000 tonne. So they've already moving that volume around, but we're not seeing it an impact on price because there's such a demand for protein. So we're very fortunate that the demand's really strong at this time.
I'd be remiss if I didn't do a plug for, the government there's a tariff finder, which is MFAT owns that, and then also MPI has export help service, which has just had a relaunch of it. So if anyone is thinking about that and sort of how to navigate through overseas market access requirements, health claims has just gone up there as well. So there's quite a lot of help navigating if you're starting to think through that. One of the examples was Wai Manuka, which is a beverage company, and then was helping with navigate through that too. So.
Just wondering how often or how quickly update that tariff finder. I use CNN.
Oh, look, thank you very much. Look, we could talk for another half hour on the whole tariff question and how particularly the Minister and his colleagues are having to navigate and use their diplomatic footwork on New Zealand's behalf. But thank you very much for sharing your strategies, your insights. I think this audience got a great deal out of it. Thank you.